Tonight I have chosen the bow, the Ojigi. And I chose it because of a secret hiding inside the word itself. Ojigi did not originally mean a bow at all. Centuries ago, it meant the right moment, the perfect timing to do a thing. How did a word for timing become the word for lowering your head? The answer is one of the most beautiful ideas Japan ever had. And we have all night to unfold it, slowly. If these stories bring you peace, consider subscribing. And if you enjoyed this one, I would love to hear from you in the comments. And now, let us begin. How old is the bow? Older than almost everything. Older than the samurai? Older than Kyoto? Older than nearly anything we now call Japan. And I can tell you how we know, because of a traveler, 1800 years ago, who saw it happen and wrote it down. Close your eyes if you like, and come back with me. It is the 3rd century of the Common Era, and we are standing on a dirt road on an island at the edge of the known world. The road is narrow, 2 people could not pass on horseback, and it runs between flooded rice fields that hold the grey sky on their surface like long mirrors. The air smells of mud and wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the fields, a village, steep thatched roofs, a thread of smoke, the sound of a wooden mallet, striking something in an even rhythm. This is the land its neighbors across the sea call Wa. It is not yet Japan. There is no emperor in a grand capital, no written language of its own, no philosophy that anyone has bothered to record. To the great continental empire in the west, the empire of chronicles and bronze and 10,000 officials, this place is the edge of the map. A traveler is walking toward us along this road. He is not from here. You can tell by his clothes, by his careful eyes, by the way he looks at everything twice. He is a visitor from that continental empire, one of those patient, observant men who are sent to far countries to look and remember and write things down. For weeks he's been moving through this island world, recording everything in his mind for the report he will one day write. What the people eat, how they fish, how they tattoo their bodies, how they plant their fields, how they mourn their dead. And then, on this road, he sees something that makes him stop. 2 figures are approaching each other from opposite directions. One is a person of consequence. You can read it in the bearing, in the quality of the woven cloth, in the way the very air around him seems organized. The other is an ordinary man of the fields, mud to the knees. The distance between them closes, 10 paces, 5. And then the ordinary man does something the traveler has never seen done in quite this way. He steps off the road. He sinks down. Not a nod, not a stoop, but all the way down, folding his whole body toward the earth. He places both hands flat upon the ground. He lowers his head until his gaze rests on the dirt between his fingers. And he holds himself there, perfectly still, perfectly silent, while the person of rank passes by. No word is spoken. None is needed. An entire message, I see you, I honor your place, pass in peace, has been delivered, received, and acknowledged, using nothing but the human body and the ground. The traveler watches. The traveler remembers. And years later, across the sea, in the official chronicle of his people, in a passage describing the customs of the island land of Wa, the scene is set down in ink. When the common people meet men of rank upon the road, they withdraw to the side, crouch down, and press their hands upon the ground. This is how they show reverence. That passage still exists. You can read it today. It is nearly 1800 years old, and it is the first written record. anywhere on earth of the Japanese bow. Let the age of that sink in for a moment. Here in the dark, 1800 years. When that ink dried, there were no samurai. The warrior class would not arise for another 1,000 years. The great Buddha of Nara had not been cast. The bronze for it still slept in the mountains. Kyoto did not exist. The tea ceremony, the rock gardens, the haiku, the castles, the kimono as we know it, none of it existed. Nearly everything we now call old Japan had yet to be born. But the bow was already there, already old perhaps even then, for the traveller described it not as a novelty, but as a settled custom, the ordinary grammar of the road, which means that the bow is not one of Japan's traditions. It is the oldest one. It is the root system beneath the entire garden. Everything else, the temples, the arts, the codes of the warriors, the rituals of tea, grew up later, around a people who already knew, before they could even write it down, that the way to honor another human being is to lower yourself before them. And here is the thread we will follow all through tonight. The quiet, beautiful arc of this whole story. Over those 18 centuries, the bow did something that almost no one ever notices. It rose. It began on the ground, hands flat in the dust, knees in the dirt, the whole body brought low. And then, century by century, it slowly lifted itself up. From the crouch at the roadside, to the formal kneeling bow performed on the wooden floors and woven mats of fine houses, to, at last, in the modern age, the stand-in bow, the upright, graceful inclination you can see today on any street in Japan, 1,000 times an hour outside train stations and school gates and tiny noodle shops with steam on their windows. The history of the bow is the history of a gesture climbing, very slowly, from the earth to the standing human form, without ever losing the meaning it carried when it was performed in the dust. The posture rose. The heart of it never moved. There are very few things in any culture on earth that have been practiced continuously, and meant continuously, for 1800 years, while quietly transforming the whole time. The bow is one of them. So let us follow it upward, era by era. Let us watch it rise. The first great age of the bow's refinement arrived with the imperial court. Those long, strange, luminous centuries when Japan's capital glittered with an aristocracy more devoted to elegance than perhaps any ruling class in human history. Picture that world for a moment, because there has never been another like it. A city laid out in a perfect grid, modelled on the great capitals of the continent. Within it, a few thousand aristocrats living lives of almost unimaginable refinement, sealed away from the muddy realities of the land they nominally governed. These were people who judged one another on the layering of coloured silk robes, 12 layers, the colours at each sleeve edge chosen to evoke the precise week of the season. People who fell in love through handwriting, before ever seeing each other's faces, because the quality of a person's brushed characters was believed to reveal the quality of their soul. People who could be socially ruined by blending their incense poorly. Now imagine what such people did with the bow. In their hands, it became calligraphy performed with the body. Every variable carried meaning. The depth of the inclination, the speed of the descent, the duration of the stillness at the bottom, the grace of the recovery, the position of the hands, the angle of the eyes. One bow said, "I am your servant in all things." A subtly different bow said, "We are equals, and I am fond of you." A bow a shade too shallow, a touch too brisk, said something one had better not say at court, and everyone present would read it instantly, the way a musician hears a wrong note. In a society where direct speech was considered crude, where meaning lived in implication and nuance, the bow became one of the most articulate instruments a person possessed. Courtiers could conduct entire silent conversations, alliance, rivalry, apology, flirtation, through the choreography of their bodies at a single gathering. And because life in that world was lived on the floor, on smooth wooden boards and later woven mats in rooms where one knelt rather than stood, the bow of the court was the seated bow, the zarei. From a kneeling position, the back held long, the hands gliding forward along the floor, the body folding over them until the head hovers low. Performed well, it is one of the most beautiful movements in all of Japanese culture, a slow wave passing through a human body, unhurried as honey leaving a spoon. It is still performed today, in tea rooms and traditional inns and the formal rooms of old families, essentially unchanged after 1,000 years. But the bow we know best, the bow that acquired the iron and the soul it carries to this day, did not come from those perfumed rooms. It came from the warriors. Toward the end of the 12th century, the world of the court came apart. Power passed out of the soft hands of the aristocracy and into the hard hands of a new class, the bushi, the warriors, the men history calls the samurai, provincial men, fighting men, men of horse and bow and blade. And with that shift, you might expect Japanese manners to have collapsed. It is what usually happens, everywhere on earth, when soldiers replace courtiers. Refinement is the first casualty. The candelabra are melted down for spear points. In Japan, precisely the opposite happened, and the reason why is one of the most quietly fascinating facts in this country's history. The warriors needed etiquette more than the aristocrats ever had, needed it not for beauty, but for survival. Think about what their world was actually like day to day. A samurai lived his entire life among armed men. Every person he greeted, every threshold he crossed, every cup of sake he accepted, involved other men who carried swords and had spent their lives learning to use them. In such a world, ambiguity is not awkward, it is lethal. A gesture misread as an insult, a posture misread as a threat, a hand resting carelessly, a little too near a sword hilt at a tense moment. Any of these could ignite violence that no one intended and no one could call back. The court aristocrat who bungled his etiquette lost face. The warrior who bungled his could lose his life and take others with him. And so the warrior class did something remarkable. Over generations, they built one of the most precise systems of physical etiquette the world has ever seen. An entire grammar of the body, engineered to make every movement legible, every intention visible, every encounter safe. There were correct ways to enter a room so that your hands were always in view. Correct ways to sit, to rise, to pass an object, to receive one. There were exact protocols for the sword itself. On which side to lay it when you knelt, for a blade laid on the right, where the hand cannot draw it swiftly, announced peaceful intent, while a blade on the left was a quiet declaration of readiness. Every detail spoke. The whole body became a document that others could read at a glance. And at the very center of that document, opening and closing every single human encounter, stood the bow. In the Kamakura period, the first great age of warrior rule, the military houses began setting these forms down in writing. Careful, detailed manuals on the conduct proper to a warrior in every circumstance of life. And in the Muromachi period that followed, the codification reached full flower. Hereditary schools of etiquette arose, entire families whose profession, whose treasure, whose identity across the generations was the knowledge of correct form. The Ise school served the shogun's own household, and the most celebrated of them all, the Ogasawara school, was built upon 3 arts, held to be inseparable: the art of the bow and arrow, the art of horsemanship, and the art of etiquette. Stop on that for a moment, because it is genuinely strange and genuinely wonderful. Archery, riding, and manners taught together as one curriculum by the same masters to the same warriors. To the warrior mind, knowing how to bow correctly belonged in the same category as knowing how to shoot from the back of a galloping horse. Both were physical disciplines requiring years of training. Both could fail you catastrophically in one careless moment. And both, at bottom, were the same achievement: complete command of one's own body and spirit under pressure. A man whose bow was sloppy was a man whose archery could not be trusted, because both flowed from the same source, and that source was the self. And here is a detail to treasure. The Ogasawara school still exists. It has been transmitting the forms of correct movement, including the bow, in an unbroken family line for roughly 700 years. There are people alive in Japan right now whose ancestral profession, since the age of the samurai, has been the bow. When a young Japanese office worker today inclines her body 15 degrees to greet a colleague in a corridor, she is performing a movement that was analyzed, refined, debated, and polished by hereditary masters across a span of time longer than most nations have existed. She has no idea. The movement remembers, even when the mover does not. Now we arrive at the question on which this whole chapter of the story turns. The question that unlocks the soul of the Japanese bow. Why would a warrior bow at all? A samurai was an armed man in a violent age. His standing, his honor, his employment, his physical survival depended on never appearing weak. Weakness invited challenge. Challenge meant blood. And yet the absolute heart of his etiquette, the gesture his manuals treated with more care than any other, the act he performed more times in his life than he ever drew his sword, was this: lowering his head before another man, dropping his eyes, exposing for one long, deliberate moment the back of his neck, the most defenseless part of the human body, to a person wearing a sword. Why? Why would men whose lives depended on never being vulnerable build their entire culture of conduct around a gesture of voluntary vulnerability? Because the bow, for the warrior, was the opposite of weakness. It was the most confident act a strong man could perform. Consider what the gesture truly says when an armed man makes it. It says, I am so secure in my own skill, in my own discipline, in the order that binds us both, that I will take my eyes off you. I will lower my guard in your presence. I trust you, and I trust myself, enough to be defenseless before you for the space of one breath. A nervous man cannot bow well. His fear leaks into the movement. Too deep, too fast. A stiffness in the shoulders that any trained eye reads instantly. A frightened bow looks frightened. Only a man genuinely at peace with himself can fold slowly, deeply, and without hurry before another armed man, because only such a man can afford to. And so, in warrior Japan, The quality of a bow became a window into the quality of a spirit. The old masters claimed they could watch a stranger bow once and know him, his training, his self-command, whether his composure was real or painted on. The bow became a kind of involuntary honesty. A man could lie fluently with his words. It was very, very hard to lie with his bow. From this grew an understanding that runs through the entire warrior tradition, and from there into the bloodstream of Japanese culture itself. That true strength and true courtesy are not opposites, but companions. That the strongest man in the room is very often the most polite, precisely because he has nothing left to prove. The old proverb gives it the perfect image. The ripening rice plant lowers its head. The fuller the grain grows, the deeper the stalk bends toward the earth. It is the empty stalk that stands tall and rigid. Substance bows, only hollowness is stiff. The warriors built an ethic on that image, and it has never left this country. Strength that cannot bend is not strength at all, merely brittleness that has not yet been tested. The strong bow because they can. Breathe slowly with that image for a little while. The rice field in late summer. Whole acres of fullness bending the same direction. The master swordsman folding forward in a calm, unhurried arc before his rival. Strength, in this country's oldest understanding, has never looked like standing tall. It looks like the ability to lower yourself, freely, gracefully, losing nothing. The warriors gave the bow one more gift before history retired them, and it is the gift you can still see most clearly today, on any street, in any season. They gave it stillness. A warrior's bow was never a bob of the head, never a quick dip and rebound. The forms transmitted by the old schools all share one essential feature: the pause. The body descends, smoothly, back straight. The movement hinging from the waist, head and spine, moving as a single line, and then, at the lowest point, it stops. It holds. One full breath. On solemn occasions, longer. A deliberate, composed stillness at the bottom of the bow, before the slow rise back to standing. That pause is the soul of the entire gesture. Anyone can lower a head. The pause is what fills the lowering with meaning. Held there, motionless, you are saying with your whole body, "This is not a reflex. I am not discharging a custom. For the length of this breath, I am placing you above myself, deliberately, attentively, and in no hurry whatsoever, to reclaim my height." Watch any beautifully performed bow in Japan today. A tea master to her guests, a veteran innkeeper at his threshold, two elderly friends parting at a station gate, and you will see it, every time, the smooth descent, the held breath of stillness, the unhurried return. 800 years after the warrior schools first codified it, the pause is still there. It outlived the warriors themselves. The swords are in museums. The castles sell admission tickets. But the stillness at the bottom of the bow, that small, deliberate silence performed with the body, is alive on every street in Japan, every single day. Performed by millions of people who have never once wondered where it came from. And all the while, the bow kept rising. As the centuries turned, as chairs and railways and paved avenues entered Japanese life, as the floor-sitting world of the old houses gave way to a standing, striding modern one, the kneeling bow of the mats gave birth to its upright descendant. The ryurei, the standing bow, the form the entire world now recognizes as Japanese. The dust of the 3rd century road, the polished boards of the warrior halls, the bright platforms of the morning station. One gesture, climbing through 18 centuries, changing its posture again and again, and never once changing its heart. So now we have watched the bow rise from the earth. We have seen it refined into a silent language by the most elegant court in history, then forged into an art and an ethic by men who staked their lives on the legibility of the body. We have found its soul, the confidence that can afford to be vulnerable, the fullness that bends, the pause that turns a movement into a meaning. But the bow's story is only half told. We have not yet measured its grammar, the precise architecture of angles that lets 10,000 store clerks fold as one. We have not yet discovered the hidden kindness inside the gesture. Why a culture that bows is a culture that gives you room. We have not yet crawled through the tiny doorway that humbled warlords, or met the deer who learned the custom from us, or stood beside the conductor who bows to empty seats in the small hours of the night. All of that is waiting, just ahead, in the deepening dark. Stay with me. The night is patient, and so is the bow. Let us begin the middle of our journey with a small scene from modern Japan, one you could witness tomorrow morning, if you found yourself in Tokyo with nowhere particular to be. It is 5 minutes before 10, outside one of the grand old department stores. A small crowd has gathered at the doors, regulars mostly. They know what is coming. Inside the glass, the staff are taking up positions, the white-gloved attendants by the entrance, the clerks at their gleaming counters, the floor managers at the head of each aisle. At 10 o'clock precisely, a soft chime sounds. The doors glide open, and as the first customers step across the threshold, the entire staff of the building, dozens of people on every floor, in every department, turns toward them and bows. Not vaguely, not approximately. In unison, backs straight, hands placed just so, every body inclining to exactly the same depth, holding for exactly the same beat, rising at exactly the same moment, like a field of grain bending under one wind. The first customers of the day walk down an avenue of perfectly synchronized respect. Some of them, the regulars, barely seem to notice. That, in its way, is the most astonishing part. A visitor seeing this for the first time usually has two reactions at once. The first is something close to awe. The second is a question that will not go away. How do they all know exactly how far to bow? The answer is that they are not improvising, and they are not guessing. They are speaking a language, and like every language, it has a grammar. Tonight, in the quiet, let me teach it to you, because it is a lovely thing to know, and once you know it, you will never watch a Japanese street the same way again. The grammar of the bow is written in degrees. The lightest bow inclines the body about 15 degrees from upright. A gentle forward lean, brief, warm, almost weightless. This is the ashaku, the Greeting bow, the small change of daily life. It is what colleagues exchange in a corridor, what neighbors trade over a garden fence, what the young clerk at the convenience store gives you, along with your receipt at 2 a.m. It is spent constantly. A person working in any service trade may perform it several hundred times in a day, and yet even this smallest coin of the realm carries the full image of the king. Even at 15 degrees, the back stays long. Even at 15 degrees, the eyes soften and the message is complete. I see you. You are not part of the furniture. We share this world, you and I, for the length of this moment. The second register inclines the body to about 30 degrees, and this is the carriage, The bow of formal respect. This is the bow that welcomes a guest, that greets a client, that acknowledges a teacher or an elder or anyone whose presence deserves more than passing courtesy. The movement is slower than the ashaku, more deliberate. The gaze drops to a point on the floor a meter or two ahead, and at the bottom, there is that held instant of stillness, the warrior's pause, alive and well after 8 centuries. The 30-degree bow is the workhorse of formal Japan. If the ashaku is a friendly word tossed across a fence, the carriage is a full, courteous sentence, complete with its period. And then there is the deep bow, the saikei, the bow of highest respect at 45 degrees, sometimes more. This one is rare, and its rarity is the whole secret of its power. It is reserved for the weightiest moments a life contains. Profound gratitude, solemn farewell, the apology that truly matters. When a body folds this far, the gaze falling all the way to one's own feet, the entire posture surrendering its height, no one within sight can mistake what is being said. Words can be inflated, repeated until they wear smooth, emptied by overuse. The deep bow cannot. It draws on an account that everyone understands must never be overdrawn, and that is exactly why, on the occasions it is drawn upon, it can move people to tears. Deeper still, at the very limit of the scale, the body can fold to 90 degrees, a full right angle, the torso parallel to the earth. In ordinary life, you may go years without seeing it. It belongs to the most sacred precincts and the gravest hours, the reverence offered before the gods at a great shrine, or an apology so absolute that the person making it is, in effect, laying their entire dignity on the ground and stepping back from it. 15, 30, 45, 90. An entire vocabulary of human regard written on a single hinge of the body. But the degrees are only the skeleton of the language. The flesh of it, the part that separates a correct bow from a beautiful one, is time. The old teachers of form have a principle for the rhythm of a bow, and once you hear it, you will see it everywhere. Descend with resolve, rise with reluctance. The fold is a touch quicker. The return is slow, noticeably, deliberately slow, sometimes twice the duration of the descent. Why? Because the rising is where the feeling lives. To fold deeply and then snap back upright is to say, there, formality discharged, box ticked, next. But to rise slowly, to let the bow linger, to come back to your full height, as though you were a little sorry to leave the gesture behind, is to say, my respect for you does not end when the movement ends. Watch a master innkeeper see his guests off in the morning. The bow descends, holds, and then unfolds upward so gradually that the guests are 3 steps toward the gate before he is upright again. The slowest part of a beautiful bow is the farewell to the bow itself. There is even a finishing touch, taught in the strictest traditions. After rising, you meet the other person's eyes again. A brief, warm completion, like the resolving chord at the end of a piece of music. Descend, hold, rise slowly, and return to the other person's gaze. 4 movements. The whole cathedral of Japanese courtesy is built from those 4 stones. Now let me show you something hidden inside this entire system. A piece of quiet genius that took me years of living in this culture to truly see, and that I have never once heard anyone say out loud. The bow is also a machine for keeping distance, and the distance is the kindness. Think about how most of the world greets. The handshake closes the gap between 2 bodies and requires a touch of skin. A stranger's palm against yours, like it or not. The embrace closes the gap entirely. The kiss on the cheek closes it past entirely. These are warm customs, and there is nothing wrong with them. But notice what every one of them quietly assumes. Permission. Permission to enter your space, to take your hand, to press against you. In those greetings, the warmth and the intrusion arrive bolted together. You cannot accept one without submitting to the other. The bow asks for nothing. Two people incline toward each other across a small, respectful gap, and here is the mechanical fact that contains the whole philosophy. The deeper the bow, the larger the gap must be, simply so that the two folding bodies do not knock heads. Read that again, slowly. In the language of the bow, the more I honor you, the more space I give you. Reverence in this country does not press closer. It steps back. The casual 15-degree nod can happen almost shoulder to shoulder. The deep 45-degree bow requires the parties to stand well apart, each granting the other a wide, dignified margin of air. Respect is measured out in distance. The bow honors not just you, but the space around you, your right to stand in the world untouched, unpressed, sovereign and whole. And the bow holds one more power that no handshake will ever have. It works at any distance. You can bow to someone across a crowded station concourse, and the message arrives intact. You can bow to a friend through the window of a train already pulling away. You can bow to an entire room at once. Try shaking hands with an entire room. You can bow to a mountain. You can bow to a torii gate standing far out in the sea. And this may be my favorite sight in all of modern Japan. You can bow to someone who is not there at all. Stand on any busy street in this country, and you will see it within the hour. A person alone on the pavement, phone pressed to ear, bowing. Earnestly, repeatedly. Folding 15-20 degrees toward absolutely no one. Sometimes punctuating each bow with a small hi, hi. The person on the other end of the call cannot see them. They know the person cannot see them. They bow anyway, because at some point in its 1800-year climb, the bow stopped being a signal sent to other people's eyes and became something that happens between a feeling and a spine. The respect is real. Therefore, the body must do something real. Whether anyone is watching has quietly become irrelevant. Remember the phone bowers. They are a clue, and at the end of this part of our story, the clue will unlock something beautiful. Let your breathing slow a little here. We are deep in the middle of the night's journey now, and the road ahead leads to smaller and smaller rooms, and quieter bows. Before the small rooms, though, one tall threshold, the shrine. Walk, in your mind, up a long gravel path beneath old cedars. The city's sound falls away behind you. Ahead, a great gate of plain wood. And beyond it, a courtyard swept so clean, the gravel shows the marks of the broom, and a wooden hall, dark with age, silent. Watch what visitors do here, what they have done, in essentially this form, for many centuries. At the gate itself, before entering, many pause and bow once, to the precinct, to the threshold. A greeting offered to the place itself. At a stone basin they rinse their hands, a ritual cleansing as old as the path. And then, before the hall, comes the most formal sequence of movements in all of everyday Japanese life. They bow deeply, twice, 2 full, slow, profound bows. They clap their hands twice, the sound sharp and bright in the cedar stillness. They hold their palms together for a quiet moment, A wish? A thanks? A thought of someone? And then they bow once more, a single deep farewell fold, before turning to leave. 2 bows, 2 claps, 1 bow. Children learn the sequence holding their grandmother's hand. It is performed at tiny neighborhood shrines wedged between office buildings and at great sanctuaries deep in the mountains, millions of times a day, in exactly the same order. And notice what stands at the heart of the sequence. Not the offering, not the words, the bows. Here, the gesture reaches the top of its range. The bow before the sacred is the bow with all its meanings turned to their fullest. I lower myself freely and gladly before something greater, and in the lowering, I am not diminished. I am placed. There is a deep restfulness in that thought, and the people walking back down the gravel path tend to walk more slowly than they walked up it. Now, come with me through a garden into the smallest and most extraordinary room in Japan. It is the 16th century. We are following a winding path of stepping stones through moss and maple shade, past a stone lantern furred green with age, toward a small hut with rough earthen walls and a thatched roof. A tea house. Inside it waits the most refined ritual this culture ever produced, the way of tea, in which a host prepares and serves tea to a few guests with a degree of care and attention that turns a simple drink into a meditation shared by everyone in the room, and guarding the entrance to that room is one of the most quietly radical doorways ever built by human hands. It is called the Nijiriguchi, the crawling-in entrance. It is a square opening cut low in the wall, and it is tiny, barely 60 or 70 centimeters to a side. A small child could walk through it upright. No adult on earth can. To enter the tea room, you must kneel on the flat stone placed outside, bend your whole body low, and crawl. There is no other honest word. Through the opening, head first, lowered, humbled, arriving inside the room on your knees. By tradition, this doorway is credited to the great tea masters of that turbulent century, and the story of its purpose is one of the most quietly subversive in Japanese history. For consider who was coming to tea. The 16th century was the age of the warlords, men who commanded armies, men whose word could erase a town from a map, men who moved through the world inside a permanent weather system of deference. Everyone bowing first, everyone bowing deepest, everywhere they went. The most powerful and most dangerous men in Japan were also, as it happened, passionately devoted to the way of tea. The Nijiriguchi made no exceptions for them. A warlord at the tea house door faced the same small square of darkness as the merchant who arrived before him. His rank could not widen it by a centimeter. His army, camped a province away, could not negotiate with it. And here is the exquisite detail. His swords could not even pass through it. The doorway was built too small for a man wearing the long blades of his class. A rack stood outside, and on it the master of armies hung his weapons, like a traveler hanging up a wet coat. Then he knelt, this man before whom provinces held their breath, and bent his proud head, and crawled through a hole in a wall into a room of 4.5 mats, where for the next 2 hours he would be nobody at all, simply a guest among guests no taller than anyone present, holding a humble bowl of tea in both hands as though it were the most important object in the world, which, inside that room, it was. The doorway, you see, is a bow built out of architecture. It does not request humility. It makes humility a structural condition of entry. Whoever you are out there, says the little square of darkness. In here you arrive lowered. And the astonishing thing is that the warlords accepted it. More than accepted it. They treasured it. Some of the fiercest men of that violent age were the most devoted students of tea. And the little doorway is surely part of the reason. It may have been the only place in Japan where such a man was permitted to set down the crushing weight of his own importance. Where bowing was not a political act to be calculated, but a simple requirement of the room, the same for everyone, and therefore, for once, free. The tea house sold the powerful, the one luxury their power could not buy them anywhere else, a moment of being small. And once inside, the bows never stop. They simply change key. The way of tea is, among other things, a slow constellation of bows. The host bows to the guests at the entrance of every stage. The guests bow in return. Each guest bows to the next before drinking, a small, charming apology for going first. The guests bow to the alcove where a single scroll hangs and a single flower stands, honoring the host's quiet choices. And most moving of all, the guest bows to the bowl. Before drinking, you receive the tea bowl, rest it on your palm, steady it with your other hand, and incline your head to it, to the bowl itself, to the unknown hands that shaped and fired it perhaps centuries ago, to the host who chose it for this day and this company, to the entire invisible chain of human care that ends in this warmth sitting in your two hands. In the tea room, the bow has shed even rank. It has become something purer, gratitude given a posture, attention made visible. The right moment, honored at the rate of one bow at a time. From the smallest room in Japan, step now into one of the most vigorous. The dojo, the training hall. Every traditional discipline of the Japanese body, the way of the sword, the way of the bow and arrow, the arts of grappling and striking and yielding, is framed from its first second to its last in bows. The practitioner bows at the threshold before stepping onto the training floor. A bow to the hall itself, to the space where the practice lives. They bow toward the front of the hall, to the art and its lineage. They bow to the teacher. And then, before anything begins, they bow to their partner, to the very person who 60 seconds from now will be attacking them with full commitment. There's a phrase that governs every one of these arts, recited in training halls from the northern snows to the southern islands. Everything begins with a bow and ends with a bow. Rei ni hajimari, rei ni owaru. And it is meant with complete literalness. The technique, the throw, the cut, the pin, happens inside the brackets of two bows, and the tradition is unambiguous about which matters more. The brackets. Strip the bows away, and what remains on that floor is just two people fighting. Restore them, and the same movements become something else entirely. A way, a discipline of the spirit that happens to use the body's conflict as its raw material. The opening bow says, what we do now, we do within bounds with respect, as partners and not enemies. I entrust my safety to you, and accept the trust of yours. The closing bow says, thank you for testing me honestly. We both leave this floor slightly better than we stepped onto it. Between two people who have just spent an hour throwing each other to the ground, that final bow is one of the warmest gestures in all of Japanese life. Ask anyone who has trained in these arts what they miss most after years away, and a surprising number will not say the techniques. They will say, the bows. And the same grammar runs on, unchanged, into the suits and elevators of modern business life. where colleagues and clients still open and close every meeting with the bow, exactly as the warrior halls taught 7 centuries ago. Only the clothing has changed. And now, because you have been so patient and the night is deepening, let me take you to Nara, the ancient capital, for the strangest and most delightful bow in all of Japan. Nara is a city of broad parks and venerable temples, and through those parks roam well over 1,000 sacred deer, unfenced, unhurried, drifting across lawns and temple courtyards and pedestrian crossings as their ancestors have for many centuries. They are protected, beloved, and thoroughly accustomed to people. Visitors buy special plain crackers, sold from little stands throughout the park, to feed them. And at some point, no one can say quite when, somebody noticed something that should not be possible. If you bow to a deer of Nara, the deer will often bow back. It lowers its head, a distinct, deliberate dip of the neck, once, twice, and then waits, looking at you. Bow again, and it may answer again. Travelers now come from the far side of the world just to exchange courtesies with them. And the images travel everywhere. A human being and a wild animal facing each other on a path beneath the maples, politely inclining their heads to one another like 2 acquaintances of long standing. Researchers who have studied the deer offer an explanation that is charmingly down to earth. Over thousands upon thousands of encounters, the deer appear to have learned that the small human folding forward movement reliably happens around cracker time, and their answering nod is, in all likelihood, learned anticipation rather than etiquette. The deer, in other words, are probably not being polite, they are being practical. The bow to a deer may simply be the shape food makes just before it appears. But step back and look at what that actually means. Because the truth here is more wonderful than the legend, not less. It means that the people of this country have bowed so consistently, so universally, for so many unbroken generations, that a wild species living alongside them absorbed the custom. Human politeness, performed reliably enough, for long enough, became a fixed feature of the natural environment. As dependable as rain, as readable as dusk, until the animals themselves learn to answer it. Nowhere else on Earth has courtesy been so constant that the local wildlife adapted to it. The bowing deer of Nara are, in their way, the most honest historical document in Japan, proof written in animal behavior across the centuries of a courtesy that never once stopped. And the bow keeps going where there is no one, human or deer, to see it at all. Ride the great trains of Japan, the Shinkansen gliding between cities at almost 300 kilometers an hour, and watch the far door of your carriage. The conductor enters, and before walking the aisle, pauses, faces the rows of passengers and bows. Fine, you may think. There are people here to see it. Perhaps it is company policy. Perhaps it is performance. But stay aboard late, on the last run of the night, when the carriages empty out one by one, and you may witness one of the quietly profound sights of the modern world. The conductor sliding open the door of a completely empty carriage, finding no one there at all, and bowing anyway. To the empty seats, to the carriage itself. The cleaning crews who turn the trains around at Tokyo Station line up and bow to each train as it glides in. Airport ground staff, having sent a plane back from the gate, stand in a row on the tarmac and bow to it as it taxis away, bowing to a machine full of strangers who will never know it happened until the aircraft is too far to see. Why bow to an empty room? Why bow to the tail of a departing airplane? For exactly the same reason as the person bowing into the telephone. And here is the clue from earlier, unlocked. Somewhere along its 1800-year climb from the dust, the bow crossed a threshold. It stopped being a message and became a state of the soul. Respect, in this country, is not switched on by an audience and off by its absence. It simply runs, continuously, like a current under the day, toward people, toward places, toward the work itself, toward the train and the carriage and the room, and the body expresses it the way a tree expresses wind. Because that is what the body of such a person does. A bow with no one to see it is not wasted. It is the purest bow there is, courtesy with no possible reward, respect aimed not at eyes but at the world. The empty carriage receives the bow because the bow was never really for the watching, it was for the truth. Let all of it settle now, drifting down through you like leaves through still water. The department store folding open like a single living thing. 15 and 30 and 45 degrees. The whole grammar written on a hinge of the spine. The slow rise that is reluctant to leave. The deep bow that steps back to give you room. The gravel path and the 2 bows, 2 claps, 1 bow under the cedars. The warlord on his knees at the little doorway. His swords hanging on the rack behind him. The partners bowing their combat open and closed. The deer dipping their heads beneath the maples. And the conductor, in the small hours, bowing to rows of empty seats as the lights of sleeping towns slide past the windows. One gesture, running through all of it like a silver thread through dark cloth. In the final part of our story, we will watch how that thread is passed to a new generation, placed by a parent's gentle hand into a child too young to speak. We will see the bow carry the heaviest weight a gesture can carry, and then at the very end, we will let the bow teach us its last and gentlest lesson, the one it has been saving for you all night. How to lower ourselves, willingly and gracefully, into rest. Stay with me. We are almost home. Here's a scene that happens somewhere in Japan, every single day. It is so small that no one has ever thought to photograph it, and so important that without it, nothing else in tonight's story would exist. Not the department stores, not the tea rooms, not the training halls, not the bowing deer. All of it begins here. A young mother is standing in the entryway of her home, in that small, sunken space by the door where the shoes are kept, saying goodbye to a visiting grandmother. The afternoon light is slanting in. In her arms she holds her daughter, a child of perhaps a year and a half, cheeks still round with babyhood. Too young for sentences, far too young to understand what a guest is, or a farewell, or respect. The grandmother gathers her bag, steps down into her shoes, turns and bows. The mother bows in answer. And then, watch closely now, with her free hand, the mother reaches up and rests her palm, very gently, on the back of her daughter's small head, and presses it softly downward. Once. The little head dips. The grandmother's face opens into delight, and she bows again, deeper this time, to the child. And something 1800 years old has just been handed to a new carrier. This is how the bow is transmitted, not through explanation, not through instruction, but through the warm weight of a parent's hand, guiding a small head down at the right moment. Today, and tomorrow, and the day after. At farewells, at thank yous, at the neighbor's gate, before the small shrine on the family shelf. Hundreds of times, thousands. The hand grows lighter as the months pass, pressing, then merely touching, then only hovering, then gone. because the child's own body has taken over the movement. By the age of 2, many Japanese children bow spontaneously, wobbling forward from the waist with the comic gravity of toddlers at more or less appropriate moments. By 3, the moments are mostly right. And the marvelous thing, the thing worth carrying into sleep tonight, is this: not one of them will remember learning it. Ask any Japanese adult when they learn to bow, and you will get the same puzzled pause, the same small laugh. They do not know. No one knows. The bow went in before memory begins, in the same lightless early country, where walking and chewing and the sound of one's own name went in. And what enters a person before memory does not sit in the mind alongside the things they know. It sits in the body, alongside the things they are. This is why asking a Japanese person why they bow is like asking why they swing their arms when they walk. The question is not unwelcome. It is simply unanswerable from the inside. The bow is not knowledge. It is anatomy. Then comes school, and the gesture begins to gather its meanings. Every lesson in a Japanese school, every lesson in every classroom, from the Northern Island to the Southern Islands, opens and closes the same way. The day's class leader, a rotating honor, stands and calls out, "Kiritsu, stand." 40 chairs scrape back, 40 children rise. A beat, then rei, bow. And 40 heads incline together toward the teacher. And here is the detail that matters, the detail that shapes a civilization. The teacher bows back. Not a nod. A real bow. Return to children. The lesson begins. 45 minutes later, the ritual runs again. Stand, bow. The teacher bowing in answer, and only then is the lesson truly over. The way a sentence is only over at its period. Run the arithmetic on that, gently. In the dark. 6 lessons a day. 200 school days a year. 12 years of schooling. Before a Japanese student graduates, the classroom bow alone has been performed somewhere in the tens of thousands of times, and answered every single time by an adult bowing back. Add the morning assemblies, the sports fields, the music recitals, the graduation ceremonies. The growing person's entire world of learning arrives framed in respect, respect given, and respect returned, until the frame becomes invisible, which is to say, until the frame becomes the world. And what is the lesson inside all those tens of thousands of bows? It is never spoken aloud, which is exactly why it goes in so deep. Spoken lessons lodge in the mind, where they can be argued with. This one bypasses the mind entirely and settles in the spine. The lesson is, you are not alone here. Other people are real as you. The room you stand in deserves your care. Begin things properly and end them properly, and the middle will tend to look after itself. Every culture on earth tries to teach its children these truths. Most use proverbs, sermons, lectures, words, which wear out. Japan teaches them through a few degrees of inclination, repeated until the truth is load-bearing. And what lives in the spine does not switch off when no one is watching. That, finally, completely, is the answer to the conductor bowing to the empty carriage at midnight. He is not performing virtue for an absent audience. He is simply moving the way his body learned to move, beginning with a warm palm on the back of his head before he could speak. The empty carriage gets the bow because the bow was never optional equipment. It is part of how the man is built. You can see the same construction at work on every sports field in the country. Japanese children bow to the field itself, to the dirt diamond, to the pitch, to the court, when they arrive for practice and when they leave it. Teams line up after every match, win or lose, and bow to their opponents, to the officials, to the stands. In the oldest of the nation's sports, the great ceremonial wrestling whose roots reach back beyond written history, two enormous men face each other across the ring and bow before they collide. And the winner is forbidden, absolutely forbidden, from celebrating over the loser. No raised fists, no roar of triumph. He bows. The defeated man bows. The respect outranks the result, and it is taught from the first day a child steps onto any field in Japan, with the same patient repetition as the classroom. The game begins with a bow and ends with a bow. And what happens in between is held, always, inside that frame. There is one more bow we must look at before the night carries us down, the heaviest one. The bow that carries what words cannot lift, the bow of apology. When something has truly gone wrong in Japan, when trust has been broken and must be answered for, not with excuses, but with the self, words are understood to be insufficient. Words are easy. Everyone knows it. The language itself is full of polished apologies that cost nothing. And so, at the genuinely grave moments, the body is summoned to pay what the mouth cannot. The person responsible stands before those they have wronged and folds deeply to 45 degrees or beyond, the gaze going down to their own feet, the whole height of them surrendered, and then they hold. And the holding is everything. An apology bow is measured not in degrees, but in seconds. To fold deeply and bounce back up is to apologize with an asterisk. Everyone present feels the hollowness instantly, the way one feels a counterfeit coin. But to fold and stay head down, the silence stretching, 1 breath, 2, 3, the bowed back utterly still while the room watches, is to say with the body the only thing that can actually be believed. I place my dignity on the ground before you, and I will leave it lying there for as long as this takes. You may look at the top of my lowered head for as long as you need to. It is a hard gesture to perform, and a hard one to watch, and that hardness is precisely the point. In a culture where the body is the instrument of truth, the deepest apology must visibly cost the body something. But notice, too, the mercy engineered into the custom, because there is one, and it is profound. Shame, everywhere on earth, is a force that wants to hide. It pulls people towards silence, denial, disappearance. The apology bow gives shame a form, a shape, a procedure, something to do. The person who has failed does not have to find impossible words, does not have to perform anguish, does not have to guess at what would be enough. The tradition tells them exactly what is enough. Fold, hold, rise. And on the far side of the rising, this is the mercy. Life is permitted to continue. The debt has a settled currency, and the currency can actually be paid. The same gesture that greets a colleague and delights a dear can, at its fullest depth, carry the weight of real human failure across to the other side. Very few movements ever devised have been asked to bear so much, and fewer still have proven able to bear it. And now at last we can come home, back to where the night began, back to the secret inside the word. You have been so patient, and it has been waiting for you all this time. Ojigi, the bow. But underneath it, the older word, the original word. Jigi, the right moment, the fitting time, the point at which conditions ripen and a thing should be done. How does a word for timing become a word for bowing? All night, without naming it, We have been gathering the answer. It has been hidden in plain sight in every scene. Think back through them now, one by one. The way you might walk back through a house, turning off the lights. The villager on the 3rd century road, sensing, not calculating, sensing, the moment to step aside and sink down. Not too early, which would be servile. Not too late, which would be insolent. But exactly then. The courtiers of the old capital, whose bows were sentences and whose timing was grammar. The warriors, reading a room of armed men, knowing in the body the precise instant a bow must begin in order to keep the peace of the world. The masters teaching that the descent and the rise must each take their proper time, fold with resolve, rise with reluctance, and that between them must come the pause, held for exactly one breath, no less and no more. The mother's palm on the small head at the right moment, every time, hundreds of times, until the child's own body learns to feel the moment for itself. Do you see it now? The bow was never primarily a posture. Degrees can be taught to anyone in an afternoon. The bow was always, first and last, an act of timing, the art of reading the moment between two people and answering it with the body, precisely when the moment asks. That is what the old word knew, and what the modern word, underneath its borrowed characters, still quietly remembers. To bow well is to be present. You cannot bow yesterday, the moment is gone. You cannot bow tomorrow, the moment has not come. The bow exists only now. It is a gesture made of pure attention to the moment you are actually in, offered to the person you're actually with. And perhaps that, more than the warriors and the schools and the 7 centuries of hereditary masters, is the real reason this small movement has survived 1800 years, while castles burned and empires dissolved around it. It is a daily rehearsal, dozens of times a day, from before memory until the end of life, of the one skill a human being can never finish learning. Being here, fully, at the right time, with another. And tonight that is the bow's final gift to you. Because the old word's promise still holds, there is a right moment for everything. And the right moment now is rest. So let the story begin its long descent, and let it descend the way a bow descends. Smoothly, without hurry, the whole body in agreement, nothing forced and nothing rushed. Consider first what your body has been doing all day, the quiet, unthanked labor of uprightness. Since the moment you rose this morning, your spine has been stacking itself tall against gravity, vertebra on vertebra. A living tower balanced and rebalanced thousands of times an hour without a single conscious instruction from you. Your neck has carried the whole weight of your head, and the head is heavy, heavier than people ever guess, through every conversation, every screen, every street you crossed. The small muscles of your shoulders have been holding their low, vigilant guard since breakfast. Standing tall is work. Being upright is work. You have been doing it so long, so continuously, that you stopped feeling it years ago. But the night feels it. The night has come to take it from you. All of it. The way the rack outside the tea room takes the swords. So let the lowering begin. Not all at once. That is not the way of the bow. Gradually. Ceremonially, if you like. Let the shoulders go first. Feel them sink, half a degree, then a degree. The way a beautiful bow begins almost invisibly, before any watcher can be sure it has started. Let the hands lie wherever they lie. They have passed and received enough for one day. Let the jaw unclench, the tongue rest loose, the small muscles around the eyes, the focusing muscles, the watching muscles, on duty since dawn. Let them soften now, their shift complete. Let the breath drop lower in the body, down out of the chest, down into the deep, slow tidal place below. And now, if you like, let the breath itself become the bow. Each exhale, a folding forward, a letting down, a gentle descent. The pause at the bottom of the breath, the held moment, that one beat of perfect composed stillness that the old masters prized above everything, the silence that turns a movement into a meaning, and each inhale, the slow rise, reluctant, unhurried, in no rush at all to be upright again. Breathe that shape for a while, with no effort. Fold. Hold. Rise slowly. Fold. Hold. Rise slowly. The oldest rhythm in Japan, older than the temples, older than the written word of these islands, performed now by your own lungs, in your own dark, in the most comfortable room you know. And as you breathe, let the night fill one last time with all of them. Everyone we have met since the story began. Because they are all still out there, even now, bowing while you drift. Somewhere, in an entryway full of evening light, a mother's palm is resting on the back of a small head, pressing gently down at exactly the right moment, and a grandmother is laughing with delight. Somewhere 40 children are rising beside their desks as the last lesson ends, folding forward together like one creature with 80 hands, while their teacher folds in answer to them. Somewhere on a darkening field, 2 teams are lined up at the center line, bowing to each other across the day's result. The winners as quiet as the losers. Somewhere in a mossy garden, a guest is kneeling at a tiny doorway, leaving their importance hanging on the rack outside with the swords of dead centuries, and crawling, low and glad, into a room where a bowl of tea is waiting and rank does not exist. Somewhere a worshipper stands alone under enormous cedars in the last light. 2 bows, 2 bright claps that startle a bird. The held silence. 1 bow more, and walks back down the gravel more slowly than they came. Somewhere under the dark maples of Nara, a deer lifts its head, regards a delighted stranger, dips its neck once in the old learned answer, and returns, supremely unbothered, to the grass. And somewhere, on the last train of the night, sliding through the sleeping countryside, a conductor steps into an empty carriage, finds no one there at all, pauses and bows to the vacant seats anyway, courtesy aimed at the world itself, before walking on down the aisle while the lights of small towns drift past the windows like slow, low stars. All of them lowering, not one of them losing a single thing by it. 1,800 years of evidence, gathered now into one quiet truth, and it is the truth the rice fields have whispered every autumn of this country's history. What is full bends. What is empty stands rigid. The deepest head is held by the steadiest heart. You can stop holding your height now. The day is over, and you bowed to it properly, in your own way, simply by living all the way through it. Whatever was left unfinished will keep safely until morning. There is a right moment for everything, the old word promised, and the right moment for all of that is not now. Now belongs to the lowering. Now belongs to the long, slow folding down of awareness, down past the day's voices, down past the lists and the lights and the small unfinished sentences, down into the warm dark where the body repairs itself all night long and asks absolutely nothing of you in return. Fold, hold, rise slowly, fold, hold, And this time do not hurry to rise. Stay down here in the held moment, that one breath of perfect stillness at the very bottom of the bow, and notice how kind it is. How quiet. Nothing is required of you in the held moment. That has been true for 800 years. No one is watching, and it does not matter, because the bow was never for the watching. The night receives your lowered head the way the cedar shrine receives the worshipper, the way the empty carriage receives the conductor's bow. Completely, gently, without needing one single word from you. The bow is older than almost everything, and in all its 1800 years, it has never once meant defeat. It means trust. It means peace with one's place in a larger order. It means a strength so settled, so sure of itself, that it can finally, gratefully, let itself down. So let yourself down. Lower. Softer. Slower. The night is holding you now, and the night can be trusted. It has done this every evening since the world began and has never once dropped anyone. Sleep is the body's deepest bow, the willing surrender of all standing, all guarding, all height, held not for one breath but until morning, and you have earned every last degree of its descent. Rest well, bow into the dark, sleep deeply, and wake tomorrow to a world that will be glad to see you. A world worth greeting the way the people of these islands have always greeted it, with a straight back, a soft heart, and a gently lowered head. Good night.